in my student years, I think that's when playing Bach was an important part of your growth and the curriculum. And Baroque music always lent itself to the guitar somehow in a very natural way, even though guitar didn't exist at the time. The guitar that existed in the Baroque times was a much smaller, simpler instrument that had two courses, and it was used in a very different way. It was used more to accompany the with the chords. But the instrument that was the main plucked instrument of the time was the lute, and lute is a natural instrument to transcribe to the guitar, despite the fact that it has many more strings. But that's something that has become, when it comes to transcriptions, a very much of a thing. But it got a little bit limited to certain composers and certain types of repertoire. And what I wanted to try to do with this album was to open that up to the Baroque repertoire that was exciting me as a listener. And I would always get my blood boil when I would listen to Carmignola playing Vivaldi, or if I think of Cecilia Bartoli's Bravura, or Jaruski and Porpora and all of that incredible music and repertoire. And I thought, why is it not possible to bring this to the guitar? And actually, I started on this album thinking this is an album of Baroque without Bach, because Bach is something that I want to do on a separate project, and it's something that has its own weight and purpose and meaning. So I wanted to see how far can I push the guitar into finding its own Baroque voice. And that was a process I found over the years very exciting and very interesting. So I started with Baroque as a student through the works of Weiss and Bach and some Scarlatti, but it was always part of a mixture of things. It never stood on its own. The only time I ever played a whole Baroque program was when I played all the lute suites of Bach. But other than that, no. And with this album, I got an opportunity to create that fresh start in so many ways, because it's a fresh start with a new label, new people, new team. It's a fresh start for me also because a normalized world after COVID and things coming back, not back to normal, actually. They are not back to normal. They are very different, but we are now continuing on a new path. And I also feel that at the time when I've been doing this for a while now and turning 40 years old and being, I find that I'm standing a new ground, and this process allowed me to do that. Absolutely not. And it was always something I admired other people doing, and some of my colleagues today do that, and also Julian Bream almost played half-time lute, half-time guitar. It was not an unusual thing at all to do that, but somehow I didn't have that in me. I feel that the aesthetic of the guitar and finding that sound on the guitar was everything I cared for and everything I wanted to. So I felt that by changing to another instrument, I would open a door. And sometimes you need to know which doors you want to open. And some doors you shouldn't open. So it's my perspective was more from the outside in. It's collecting all those influences and bringing them right into the core and the center of the music and of my artistry. I tell you, when I started the process of creating the repertoire and thinking about this album, I had this feeling that there is a lot that I need to change in order to be worthy of the music. And I started experimenting with different strings and with changing the way I play, with trying to create a different kind of sound and so on and so forth. But somehow that whole process for me felt as if I was walking on a very thin ice. And I felt that I wasn't feeling stable. And when you are not feeling stable in that, it also means that, yes, you are out of your comfort zone, but you can also be out of your comfort zone and still be comfortable. And I realized that actually the only way this is going to work is that if I take everything that I have learned from those explorations and going deep into the subject, and then taking it to my sound and my world and my aesthetic and the way of playing that has been with me from the beginning. And only then I felt that I arrived to a point where I was ready to record. And that is the most wonderful crossing over of the genres that I have experienced in my artistic life so far. I couldn't have had a better collaborator than Johnny, because he is literally the kindest, most open, creative, wonderful man and colleague who is so generous. And we were meeting many times, working on the pieces. And when you find yourself with this repertoire, you are so out of your depth because there aren't transcriptions. There's nothing. There's only the original for 4 violins and continuo. And meeting with Johnny, figuring it all out, then going away and then working with Michael Lewin on the guitar part. I wanted to make sure that we are doing it because it's going to sound great, that we are going to add another layer of value to the original, not take away. And in the studio also, I didn't want to use any multi-tracking or anything at all, because I felt this needs to feel like a guitar concerto. And somehow it worked. And I'm really, really thrilled with it. I think those Lestro Armonico concertos are particularly challenging because they are for 4 solo violins. And I think they work. And then with Johnny redistributing the parts between my solo parts and then the harpsichord and the conversations and the dialogues that happen within the piece, it was just really really exciting and a completely new territory for me. And Michael was my teacher at the Royal Academy of Music. He was the person that met the 17-year-old me, fresh out of Montenegro and completely lost in space. And he guided me through that incredible transition. And he, by working with him at the Academy, I really got all the tools I needed in order to be the best musician that I could become. And no one knows my playing better than Michael, and having his support on this album has been essential. It's been absolutely wonderful to evolve in that relationship over the years, because we worked on other things before in the past, but here it was just amazing to really see how far we can go. And I'll give you an example. When you have a piece like Art and the Hours, it's originally written for harpsichord, very often performed on the piano, modern piano with pedals, where you're sustaining the lines and there are so many parallel lines happening at the same time. to do that on the guitar with 4 fingers of the left hand, it's really something. It's like a swan that glides, but then there is so much work underneath. And doing that with Michael and just like getting into that zone was an incredible artistic process for me. And I'm so grateful to have had those opportunities to be out of my comfort zone with Johnny and with Michael, and in the studio also with Simon Kiln, who produced it, to be vulnerable and to be myself. I originally didn't plan to have it on the album. I thought this was going to be an album of Baroque music without Bach. I thought I'll do Bach another time on a separate project dedicated to Bach. And then after all the research and making of transcriptions and figuring out the plan for this album, I had Ramo, Kupram, Boccherini, Scarlatti, wonderful examples of all this Baroque repertoire all around Europe from all the European composers. For a lot from composers representing all the different countries around Europe during Baroque time. And somehow it was like the planets that were gravitating, but they were gravitating like free radicals. And they didn't have a center. And that center most naturally became the chaconne. The moment I put the chaconne in the core of that recording, I felt that now I have the sun that is going to draw all of those planets in the most wonderful and most natural way. I've had the chaconne in my fingers for a very long time. And with a piece like that, you never feel ready to record it. But somehow, having gone through the processes with the transcriptions and finding out about the repertoire, which is much bigger and wider in the Baroque context than what I assumed it was before I started this process, the chaconne started to have its own place in that whole constellation, because it had a meaning as the beginning and as the end. And that made me feel more than ever and more than with anything else really ready that it was the time to commit that to the tape and to put that right where it is. And I'm really happy that I was brave to do that, because it's a daunting thought that something stays there for the rest of your life. And with a piece like the chaconne, you want it to be your chaconne, the chaconne. And it's a nice feeling when you listen to it back, at least for now. You wouldn't change a note about it.